Midway Presents Arcade's Greatest Hits is a 1996 compilation game for the Mega Drive that features 5 retro arcade games by Williams prior to their buyout by Midway. In fact, the game was released earlier in 1996 in North America as Williams Arcade Greatest Hits, but as PAL region dwellers, we got the Midway variant. The compilation was developed by Digital Eclipse and is one of their first retro compilation jobs. The company continues to port retro games to modern systems to this very day, with their latest release coming in the form of the Disney Classic Games Collection, and later this year they will release the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection. While the presentation on the game menus is a little sparse, what Digital Eclipse do better is in the accuracy of the game's individual presentation. Despite the change in resolution, each of these ports controls and feels like a very accurate representation of its original game. Each game is also host to a plethora of options to mess around with, whether it's number of lives, difficulty, what score you need to hit to gain an extra life, and much more. These options basically give you access to the arcade board's dip switches, and again it shows an amazing attention to detail. So let's talk about each game in the collection, starting with Eugene Jarvis and Larry DeMar's classic Defender. Defender sees you flying your ship around an endlessly looping stage, trying to protect the astronauts at the bottom of the screen from being abducted by the alien invaders. Quickly gun down the aliens as fast as possible, and if they capture an astronaut, shoot down the alien and then fly over the astronaut to briefly save him from harm. If you take the astronaut back to the surface of the planet, then you gain a nice point bonus and the comfort of knowing he is temporarily safe. But be careful, you can easily shoot the astronauts as well, so precise aiming is key to saving them. You also have use of a hyperspace button to warp you around the stage, and a smart bomb to destroy all enemies on screen. It's a fast, frantic and addictive game that is easy to learn and difficult to master. A true arcade classic that has to be played. Defender 2, also known as Stargate, is basically more of the same, but now there's warp holes to fly into which will warp you around the stage, and you also have use of an Invisicloak ability that makes you temporarily invisible and invulnerable, but it soon runs out of energy. If the original Defender wasn't manic enough for you, then Defender 2 will certainly test your abilities. This is also one of 2 games on the collection that can be played in 6-button mode. Simply press the mode button on the 6-button controller to activate this feature, which allows all of the various abilities to be mapped to an individual face button. A lovely feature that is easy to miss. Joust by John Newcomer is another simple game that quickly grips you before it ups the stakes incredibly quickly. In Joust, you ride around on a flying ostrich, dueling with other ostrich riders by colliding with them at a slightly higher elevation. When beaten, the rival ostrich riders turn into eggs, which can be collected for extra points. If the eggs are left alone long enough, they hatch into new ostrich riders, which must also be defeated. Defeat the entire wave to move on to the next stage. But hold on, as the stages progress, you are given less and less platform space as the lava burns it away, making constant flight almost unavoidable. This constant need for movement and the way the screen wraps around on itself makes for some of the most frantic action in gaming history, and it's a huge amount of fun. We return to the domain of Eugene Jarvis for Robotron 2084, an iconic twin-stick shooter from 1982 that always suffered in home console ports due to the controllers at the time being entirely reliant on a single D-pad and face buttons. This version of the game is somewhat improved by the 6-button mode, which maps the various face buttons in a way that sort of resembles a second joystick, but it's hard to get used to. Robotron 2084 sees you gunning down armies of robots and saving innocent bystanders by walking over them. It's incredibly fast and intense to play, and it's an extremely loud and flashy game as well, a real assault on the senses. This is by no means the best port of the game, but it's a pretty serviceable one that looks and sounds great. but definitely play it with the 6-button controller because the 3-button mode severely hampers your firepower. And finally we have Noah Falstein and John Newcomer's Sinistar. Sinistar is probably the most involved game of the bunch, playing very much like Asteroids, except you're attempting to mine crystals out of the asteroids before the enemy ships do. The enemies are trying to build the Sinistar using these crystals. Sinistar is the ultimate weapon and the game's big baddie. Thankfully you can defeat him by mining crystals to turn into Sinibombs, and a total of 13 are needed to take down the Sinistar. Once again, this is an intense and very involved little game that requires a little more learning than the others, but it's a hugely rewarding thing to play once you get the hang of it.